Karen Jane Allen was born in the 50s in Carrollton, Illinois. Her father's job as an FBI agent found the family moving often. After graduating high school in Lanham, Maryland at 17 years old, Allen moved to New York City to study art and design at the prestigious Fashion Institute of Technology. She later attended University of Maryland before seeing a Jerry Grokowski play that changed her life forever. It gave her the acting bug. Today, I talked to Karen about her life, her career, and her new film that's got the critics raving, Year by the Sea. Your first film was National Lampoon's Animal House. So what was that like for you in your first role?
I knew absolutely nothing about making a film. I had worked in the theater only, but fortunately for me, almost all of the other actors I was working with in that film were theater actors who were doing their first film. Peter Rieger, Tommy Halls, we can just go down the line. Mark Metcalf, Bruce McGill, all theater actors, all living in New York City, all, never having, Tommy Halls may have done a film, Peter Rieger may have done a little part, but, we were all in the same boat, so it made it really quite fun, and then, of course, we had, a kind of ridiculously fun script to work with, and John Landis, who was making his first studio film, and John Belushi, who was at the peak of, or at the beginning of the peak of his Animal House success, not Animal House, I mean Saturday Night Live success, and he was such a blast, and Donald Sutherland, who came in to work with us, who I got to work with in particular, and it was great. I mean, we're about to start, believe it or not, I call this the film that won't stop celebrating itself. And it's really true, and that it won't. And this year, or 2018, is its 40th anniversary. So already I've been invited to like 3 reunions, and one in San Francisco and one in New York City. And it's like, we get to continue celebrating it. It won't go away.
And it's an amazing film, so that's a great one to start with.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to start your career.
No, not at all. So a few years later, you starred as Marion in Raiders. So what was that like? Did you have any idea that it was going to go on to become like one of the most legendary films ever?
Well, not a clue, of course, except George Lucas was producing it and had also been involved, with the story along with Phil Kaufman. And, it was Steven Spielberg was directing it, kind of fresh off of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So there was certainly an enormous amount of glow around it, like the Ark, kind of, it was emanating this glow. Right. And it was just a matter of, was it going to live up to people's expectations? Tell you the truth, I don't even know what kind of expectations were out there about it. I remember when I read it, I remember thinking, Raiders of the Lost Ark. What a terrible title. That was really what I thought. Raiders of the Lost Ark. I was like, what does that even mean? And even after I read the script and I got the story, I still thought, surely they will change that title.
Right.
But that shows how much I know, right?
And then you did a few more films, and then you went on to star on Broadway in The Monday After the Miracle.
Yeah.
And so, how was, as an actor that moved to New York City, what was that like to be on Broadway?
Well, I think that is one thing that any young actor who comes out of the theater background, that's the dream. The dream is to get a role on Broadway. You want to work on Broadway, but working off Broadway is great as well. But it is, particularly back then, there were a lot more serious plays that were being done on Broadway. Today it's so dominated by musicals and spectacles and things. But back then it was, that's where an important play went. And an important play went to Broadway. And this one had Arthur Penn directing it, which I was a huge fan of his work, both on stage and in film. And so that was an incredible opportunity for me to work with Arthur Penn. We worked on this play for a year and a half together. We were in 4 different theaters. We were at the Kennedy Center for two or 3 months before we
Wow.
came to Broadway. So I learned a lot from him as a director. It was a really, really seminal learning experience for me, because he's just one of those directors that you want to absorb everything he has to say, because was very, very smart and very, very delightful person to work with. So I mean, the challenge for me is I was playing a woman who was both deaf and blind, and it for an actor to step into shoes of someone of that great historical significance as Helen Keller, and someone who we don't, it feels almost impossible to understand. As actors, we really try to take on the given circumstances of a character. Those are pretty amazing given circumstances. Is that someone, she was born with sight and hearing, but she lost it very, very early in her life, and really became incapable of really grasping language at all, and which is what The Miracle Worker had been all about.
Right.
so
Right.
beautifully. And then he wrote this play, which starts when Helen is graduating from Radcliffe College with Annie Sullivan at her side, finger spelling into her hand all of the lessons. And, it turned out there was quite a brilliant, brilliant mind inside of this girl who had been so closed down from the world. And so it was just extraordinary experience for me to get the opportunity to do it.
That's so awesome. And then, can we talk about Scrooge for a moment? It's one of my favorite movies ever. It's a perennial in my place. I mean, so what was that like?
It was a great amount of fun. We started off shooting in New York. We did all the New York scenes first in the middle of the winter, and there was just lots of snow, and it was cold, but it was fun. And then we ended up out in Los Angeles shooting a lot of the rest of it on big sound stages. And Bill Murray, who is probably one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life, and he was in rare form, and we often, were just constantly improvising scenes. And, as an actor, most of the time in film, they're very serious about you sticking reasonably close to the script, or having like serious conversations if you're going to change a word or a sentence. And,
Right.
And in this case, a lot of that just kept getting like thrown to the side. And, we would just be kind of, making things up as we went along, and which was an awful lot of fun, and at times I think possibly frustrating for Dick Donner, but it I mean, again, it's one of those films that's so much fun to put into the mix of all the holiday films, because
Yeah.
I'm a huge, I watch like It's a Wonderful Life, like every single Christmas, there's all those Christmas films, but most of them are beautiful and poignant and touching. But this one is so irreverent and so silly and just a lot of fun. So we need something like that in the mix of the
Absolutely,
of the Christmas
I love
films.
it. I absolutely love it. And then, so 28 years later, you return to the iconic role of Marion in Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So how did that feel, coming to something that had blown up into such a big franchise that, it was worldwide? I mean, it's such a giant thing. How did that return feel for you?
Well, extraordinary. I really honestly didn't think there would be a fourth one. I was told when I got cast to do Raiders of the Lost Ark, I was told, we're going to shoot 3. Your character's only going to be in the first one because they're going to go backwards in time. So the Indiana Jones part will go all 3, and your character will only be in the first one. I was like, great, fine, that's happy with that. And then they made all 3, and I think all 3 were considered very successful films. And then there was this long gap, and I just always assumed, they'd done the 3 they set out to do, and that there wouldn't ever be another one. And yet you would hear these little rumors every once in a while. Once there was internet, you'd see these little things on the internet. Oh, talk of another Indiana Jones. And at times there would be talk about my character being in it, and at times that would just go away for years at a time. And I really had I think at the time in which I got the phone call and they told me there was a script and that they wanted me to read it and that there was a role in there for Marion, I was completely taken by surprise. I think I hadn't really thought about it much one way or another for at least a couple of years. And so, I happily zipped into New York and sat down and read the script. And when I saw what they had done with the character and how, the fact that Marion had been his one true love and he had been her one true love, and the whole story that they had created, it's very, very touching.
Yeah.
I was very touched by it because, it was bringing these characters back and making their relationship significant. And, so I was quite delighted by that and very excited to get back with, working with Stephen again, who wouldn't want to do that, and Harrison and Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall and George Lucas. And, so it was a little bit like, wow, isn't this fantastic? Because, the film business and theater, a lot of times you don't get that opportunity to work with people, a second or third or fourth time. And it's really actually one of the most delightful things that can happen is to go back and work with people that you've enjoyed working with and done something that's been really appreciated. That's a special experience. So
that's awesome.
I'm glad I got to have it. Yes.
So your latest project, Year by the Sea, is based on the best-selling novel by Joan Anderson. And so tell us about, how did that film come to be? How did you get involved?
I just got a phone call from my agent one day, and he said, good scripts these days are kind of few and far between because, I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said a million times to say that, as we get older, particularly for women, it's a struggle to find really quality material. A script that really makes you think, wow, I have to do this. There are very few, and there are an awful lot of wonderful actresses of my generation. And, we all want to work and keep working. So this was sent to me to look at, and I was told that they were interested in meeting me. And I read it, and I thought, wow, I would love to tell this story. I very much related to who Joan is and the things that she had gone through. And I literally finished reading the script, set it down, went right out to a Barnes & Noble, grabbed a copy of Joan's book, read it in about 3 or 4 hours, and felt even more deeply, that this was a project that I wanted to do. So several days later, I met Alexander Janko, the director, producer, composer, and, what might have been a 15-minute meeting turned into about an hour and 15-minute meeting, and we just found we had a lot of things in common, and we had a lot of thinking in terms of the story and Joan's life, that we were very much on the same page. And a few days later, they asked me to do it. So
wow. So and the movie is extremely powerful, and you are absolutely amazing in it. So Joan meets these characters, these people along the way who really teach her about life. So who in your life has been those teachers that you've met along the way?
Oh gosh, I think one of the real extraordinary moments in my life was the moment in which I really, for the first time ever, thought I would want to be an actor, which took me completely by surprise at the age of 22, was Rudyard Cheslak, who was Jerzy Grotowski from the Polish Theater Laboratories. He was one of his leading actors, and a performance of his that I saw back in 1972 or 3 affected me so deeply that literally my life changed. You know, you have those moments sometimes in your life where an event or an experience sort of suddenly shifts the whole way that you look at your life and yourself and the way you want to move forward. And that was certainly a huge one for me. Working with Arthur Penn, huge for me. You know, becoming a member of the Actors Studio and working with a lot of the people at the Actors Studio there's been a lot of, I mean, certainly working with Steven Spielberg, certainly being a part of that film, very life-changing, kind of shifted me into a different direction in my life. Later, I worked with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward on The Glass Menagerie, and Tennessee Williams was a part of that experience. And, you know, for me, a lot of times the things that have really shifted and changed my life have had to do very much with coming into contact with extremely fascinating, creative people whose way of viewing their own creativity has inspired me. Certainly the birth of my son was a huge and amazing event, like meeting my son.
Right.
And then he's 27 now. Meeting him, getting to know him as a person, watching him move into the world, big event in my life. Very, very special. I don't know. I'm sure there's lots I'm not thinking of. That's a few.
Thank you. So one of my favorite quotes is from the film is I thought we plateaued with age. And then the character says, we don't. And then you say, well, we're not there yet. So is that true for you?
Yes. I mean, I think, well, of course, the whole concept of plateauing with age, it's like, what age? I mean, there are some people who are 95 and they haven't plateaued yet. Yeah, I've met some and they're pretty amazing and they're out there and they have this youthful spirit. I mean, I suppose, and I think we all somehow know this, we have to keep ourselves healthy so that we can keep growing and we can keep learning and we can keep allowing the events around us to inspire us. And we need to maintain that kind of energy that enthuses us, which Joan Anderson, by the way, has in spades. I mean, she's very secretive about her age, so I can't tell you how old she is, but she's still going strong, that woman.
That's amazing.
And she's an inspiration. She's written now, I think, 6 or 7 books about this process, this kind of rediscovery of herself and her desire to continue to grow and continue, of not plateauing with age, So.
Yeah, I hear so many people say, when you hit 30 or when you hit 40, everything, your body stops, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but then I know 60 and 70 and 80 or 90-year-olds that are at the gym every day and look amazing. So,
Amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and you see them on ski mountains zipping down those slopes, and you see them like out traveling, you go to some obscure place and you see an 85-year-old couple who are like in, Patagonia. And, I actually have traveled around a lot and I've met people that's kind of in their 80s, they're just traveling all over the world.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of it is just like staying young at heart, young in mind. We obviously need to stay healthy too, but.
Absolutely. So another quote that I loved, vital lives are about action. So are vital lives about action?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I think that's the natural flow, in life. Things arise, curiosities arise, interest arises, things arise from inside of us. And yes, to stay vital, the ability to put those ideas and thoughts and inspirations into form, into an action, is what our vitality is, as far as I understand it. I mean, I think that, when we, if when people live in their minds alone, it's not so good. That we think of all these things we want to do, or things we're interested in doing, or things we want to pursue, and yet we stop ourselves. I think that's what Joan is talking about. Like, we need to not only have the desires and the thoughts, but we need to activate them.
Yeah. Awesome. So how have the lessons in Year by the Sea, and there are many, many good lessons in there. How have the lessons in Year by the Sea affected you in your life?
Well, I think Joan really does inspire me to, stay like she is. She's an elder. She's older than I am, and she's still living this very interesting, creative life. And I think one of the ways that her story inspires me, I'm not in a marriage, but one of the things about her life that I find very inspiring is the way in which she has created this idea that just because a marriage has sort of stopped growing and gotten to that stuck place, and this would go for relationships as well, that it doesn't have to be the end of it, that people are able to renegotiate, to re-navigate, to sort of basically maybe do what she did, get away from it for a while, reconfigure sort of oneself. That if you stay vital in yourself, then you have to kind of demand that of the relationship as well. If you start feeling stuck in yourself, the relationship you're in can get stuck. So if I'm going to bring that to myself, I would just, bring that as a piece of wisdom to myself for some potential future relationship, because I'm sort of, I don't have anyone to practice on at the moment. But I love that. I love that her second book was called An Unfinished Marriage, and I love that she went back to her marriage at the end of this period of discovery, and she brought it home, and she basically said, I'm growing, I've grown, now I want to bring that growth into our relationship. Come with me. She reached out her hand and she said, come on, let's do this together. That's really turns me on, that that concept that I think a lot of times I've watched in my own life, people get stuck in a relationship, and it seems easier to walk away from it than it does to do the work.
That's amazing. That really is life-changing,
Yeah.
So, and you kind of answered this a bit, but so now I want to twist it a little. This film is something that I think is underrepresented in Hollywood, which is amazing roles, meaty, meaningful roles for women of a certain age. And you talked about that a little bit earlier, but is there a solution for it? Is there a fix?
My solution is, and I've just started directing, I've been directing in the theater for about 10 years, and I just directed my first short film. But my solution really is that that women need to start writing their stories. They need to start directing more, stepping into the shoes of a director. And there seems to be a culture out there right now that is very pro bringing women more into that process of directing. I think women have produced for a long period of time. I think we now need more women at the helm to be able to greenlight projects. But I think the writing aspect is essential because, a story, a script, whether it's television or film or a play, it all comes from the idea. It all comes from what story do we have to tell. And I think, we need women to start being bold enough to tell their stories and then find support in this community, the film community, television, to build those stories into projects. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I think there's a long way to go still, but it seems to me, I try to keep my finger on the pulse of these things, these issues.
Right.
And I would say, things are looking good. I'm cautiously optimistic.
That's great. So a couple more things. What is success to you?
Oh, that's always one of those questions. I think it exists on many different levels for me. One is just very almost personal and spiritual, and how I feel in my own skin, in my own life, in my own day-to-day. How is my balance in terms of caring for the world and caring for myself and being involved and taking time to contemplate or think inwardly. I mean, that's success, a kind of balance in one's life. And then I suppose success is also, continuing to feel a lot of excitement and interest in pursuing things that I love to do and be involved in, and having those met with a certain amount of I guess you want things to be able to move forward, to not be constantly, we have to deal with being up against obstacles at times, but you want to be able to overcome obstacles enough to feel that sense of successfulness by just being able to work in a way that feels productive and meaningful, I guess.
Awesome. And then thank you. And last thing, Animal House, Indiana Jones, Starman, The Glass Menagerie, Scrooge, Malcolm X, The Sandlot, one of my favorites, Perfect Storm, Here by the Sea. These are just some of the films from your resume. What do you think when you look back at a resume like that?
I don't look back a lot. I like to look forward. I'm not a big backward looker. I have conversations with people like this all the time. I say, I'm really not very interested in the past so much as I'm really very interested in what's going on now and what will happen. I think really, my attention tends to be more in the, now and planning future. So, I think if I do look back at those, every once in a while something will force me, to look back at my body of work. And, I feel just very grateful and privileged to have been able to work on this group of films. I think there are a lot of really, really wonderful films in this body of work. And sometimes I hear people say negative things about, it must be so hard to be an actor and stuff. And I find myself thinking, I've had a wonderful life as an actor. I have had so many adventures. I've met so many fantastic people who I have enjoyed working with. I don't know. I feel lucky. I feel like I've had a very lucky life, and I think that those films sort of reflect that in some way, I suppose.
Well, it has been a pleasure to watch your body of work, and a Year by the Sea is absolutely an amazing film. Thank you so much, Karen, for talking with us today. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Okay, Kyle, it was really, really nice to talk with you too.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Kyle. Bye.